Good afternoon, everyone. This is Field Notes at Project Cav. Today, we're talking about a system that works very well, but is finite. And when there's a gap in that system, the question is, do you have the ability to take care of yourself? This is really a conversation about personal preparedness and specifically what happens in the gap when the help you count on a day-to-day basis is delayed or unavailable. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an example with some insight from a first responder perspective after more than a decade in public safety. During my time in public safety, I've seen the system work overwhelmingly well, almost always. But there are still times when they can become overwhelmed or strained because it is a finite system. Police, fire, EMS, all the other services that help our communities run are generally very well staffed, well equipped, trained, and are built for operating at a standard load that they operate at 99.9% of the time. They have ways of tracking and keeping up with numbers on call volumes and call types, whatever the case, however they figure out all these numbers to staff for a standard day. So police, fire, EMS are generally very well staffed, trained, equipped, and they have the resources available to them. And they build that system around a standard load that they operate in 99.9% of the time. So like a standard day and call volume and needs that they require, they build a system to work really well in that environment. It's the other 0.1% of the time when something catastrophic or unpredictable happens that they couldn't anticipate that creates a strain that you really can't staff for in advance. Again, staffing is exactly right almost all the time. The staffing lets them run effectively and it makes sense with the resources that are needed on a day-to-day basis, and it allows them to run very effectively and proficiently without just having resources sitting by being wasted. Like think payroll people just doing nothing because they have overabundantly staffed. So they do operate at that base level and they do it very well. It's when they get those unpredictable, random events that are significant in nature and require significant resources that create the strain. And I want to be very clear during this conversation. This is not criticism of any particular system that might be in place or systems as a whole or anything like that. It's just to get you thinking about the things that realistically happen. There are things that all these entities, at least in my experience in any system I've worked with and been around, there's ways that they prepare for these types of predictable events. Take, for example, like a weather pattern, a natural disaster. In my experiences, there's people that monitor and predict, like they monitor and keep eyes and track those types of things so that as they become an issue or a potential issue for their area that they're responsible for, they can start anticipating the needs for additional resources, additional staffing, mutual aid, and that kind of thing. But again, no system in life is perfect. There are things that just happen at a scale that you couldn't predict or changed that you couldn't predict. And sometimes events happen that are just completely random and they weren't predictable. So despite their best efforts, no matter what, sometimes resource times are going to stretch to be longer. Transport times are going to slow down, like say in an ambulance. Response times for police, fire, and EMS are going to get slower. Resources get thin and overwhelmed. The question I have for you is, if and when that happens, do you have the skill sets to cover the gap within reason? Let me give you a quick example on where my head goes with this. I've worked several large localized storm systems, weather issues, that type of thing. And in those situations, there's typically a lot of trees down, trees into houses, roadways become a wreck. There are literal wrecks in the roadway. There might be structure fires going on, police calls going out, medical calls. Everything is happening all at once. There's a sudden surge in the need for public safety in all capacities typically. So during these events, you're going to have those resources that again, experience that really high spike and become saturated with calls. Again, all at once. So naturally, there's going to be people that are do-it-yourselfers, self-reliant types like me and you that are going to try to solve their own problems. Let's just, for example, um, there's going to be a lot of people who call public safety, hence the spike, but there's going to be others that try to handle it themselves. And let's just, for example, say winter storm, tree comes down in your yard and you need to clear it. You know, you're going to have to clear this tree. You don't want to pay to have it done in a couple of days. You're just going to go cut this tree up. So it's something that I would do. I have family that would go cut it up, whatever. So you go out here, fire up the chainsaw, and you get to cutting. And even though you're doing all the right things, wearing the appropriate gear, all that stuff, you make a mistake, you slip, and you cut your leg. And now you have a arterial bleed in your leg. Meanwhile, the system's already strained. Calls are going out everywhere, units are tied up, resources are saturated, and now you have this major problem with this arterial bleed in your leg. And the help that most people would normally count on, 911, might not be available or delayed, potentially even extremely delayed. So the question is in this situation, do you have the ability to stop an arterial bleed in the time that it takes to save your life? Do you have a tourniquet? Do you know how to apply it properly, fast enough for it to matter and actually save you? You can search data online, but data shows that you can die from an arterial bleed in as quickly as 2 minutes. You can bleed out in 2 minutes. Even in a well-funded, fully staffed urban department on a normal day, 2 minutes is an extremely short window of time. Help is almost never that quick and that close. So the sequence of events that are going to eat into that 2 minutes, they may not happen exactly like this, but in general terms, you've cut your leg, you're bleeding severely, you have hit an artery, you have an arterial bleed. Your 2 minutes, according to data, you can bleed out as quickly as 2 minutes, has started already. So you've got to now identify that you have this problem, and I need to identify that you need to call 911. You've got to get your phone if it's with you. You've got to find your phone if it's not. You've got to make the call. You've got to speak to an operator. They have to get dispatched. They have to get the units dispatched. And then these units have to get on the road and then travel to you, get to you, and make it to you and identify the need. And your 2 minutes started when you cut that leg. I'm not necessarily going to say it's impossible because impossible is a very strong word, but I would have to see some statistics that convince me otherwise that the overwhelming majority of people, if anyone, lives within a window of 2 minutes for that chain of events to occur and you get care from a 911 response, even in a perfectly normal scenario. That is just a lot of things that has to happen in 2 minutes potentially for you to not bleed out. And that's why I use it as an example of like, do you have the skill set to mitigate that issue? So this is exactly the kind of thing that reminds me of why I personally want to be able to handle this type of thing myself as much as I can. I want to be able to fill these gaps as much as I can with skills and knowledge. In my background, this particular scenario, I'm already trained for. I have been trained. I know how to apply a tourniquet. I know when to apply a tourniquet. I've been trained to that level. But even in my personal life, I carry a tourniquet. I've bought a tourniquet with my own money, and I know how to use it and carry it with me when I see the need to. Granted, I probably don't carry it enough, but when I go participate in activity that significantly increases the odds of me potentially needing that, I take it with me. But not everybody has that background and that level of training. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation, is bring some awareness to this type of situation. Maybe you don't have that type of training or those resources, but this is something important to start thinking about. There are programs out there for exactly this, though. One that comes to mind is Stop the Bleed. It's built to teach civilians things like tourniquet use for severe bleeding. Maybe that's a program worth looking into. I myself haven't personally taken that course because, again, my background is more in depth and has taught me that already. but I hear good things about it, and I know it's meant to address that civilian use. Um, I'm not here to tell you exactly what to train on and what you need to prioritize as far as like do this, then this, then this. This is just a conversation that gives you a very realistic example of being aware of the things that you might want to prepare for, and to remind you and get your brain thinking that like maybe I should start learning some skills and getting the resources needed to fill some of these gaps so that I can be better prepared. And look, the goal of this video isn't to put you in a fear-based mindset. It's just to get you thinking about things that can realistically happen on our personal preparedness journey. I'm on a journey with you, and how you might cover more of the bases yourself when things in the world get strained. Um, my mindset is like if I build more of these skills and get a bit more training, I can close more of these gaps to better prepare myself and my family. And I hope to encourage you to think about things in a similar way. The system works overwhelmingly most of the time, but it is finite, and there are times when it gets strained. And in those moments, you might be responsible for covering some of these situations on your own. And for me personally, I believe I'm better off being equipped and adapted for the things that I can reasonably be equipped and adapted for, rather than just assuming that nothing is going to happen and then it does. And with that, this is Project Cav. Do good, be an asset. Until next time.